Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. It keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Today, we will be covering one topic, one idea, one piece of art, a piece of music. Don't worry. We are going to be talking about Almost Famous, the 2000 film directed and written by Cameron Crowe, that is about an aspiring young music journalist and his journey on the road with the fictional band Stillwater, and thereby through the early 70s rock and roll music world. Classic film. It is the 20th anniversary of its release. It came out September 15th, and the year 2000, the new millennium, and ever since then, it has been a favorite of music fans and movie buffs alike. It is one of my all-time favorite films, so I thought, let's do a little combination between a movie and a music podcast, because this movie is a love letter to music, specifically the rock and roll music of the 1970s, and it is just not only about that time, but just about fandom and obsession and your heroes and the humanity underneath the idealized versions we have of rock stars, really. And it is a coming-of-age film at its core, and another great film just about music journalism, so I figured this was as good a time as any to discuss this film, especially in light of its anniversary. Just absolutely adore this film, and I know so many other music fans do as well. It was, as I said, written, directed by Cameron Crowe, starring Billy Crudup, Frances McDormand, Kate Hudson, and Patrick Fugit, along with Phillip Seymour Hoffman. Tells the story of a teenage journalist writing for Rolling Stone in the early 1970s, his touring with the band Stillwater, and his efforts to get his first cover story published. As Roger Ebert wrote, it's as if Huckleberry Finn came back to life in the 1970s, and instead of taking a raft down the Mississippi, got on the bus with the band. He also went on to say, Almost Famous is many things at once. A bittersweet coming-of-age story, an exceptionally vivid evocation of the mid-70s rock culture, a love letter to music itself, but at its core, it's as much a film about journalism as All the President's Men. So, just great summations of the film. It is a coming-of-age. It's a story about journalism, and I really like that comparison to Huckleberry Finn, because you really are on this journey, and along the journey we, the audience, learn so much about the world, but more importantly about the characters themselves. The film is semi-autobiographical, as Crowe himself was a teenage writer for Rolling Stone. It's sort of based on his experiences touring with the rock bands, the Allman Brothers, Led Zeppelin, Eagles, and Lynyrd Skynyrd. Crowe has discussed how during this period he lost his virginity, fell in love, and met his musical heroes. These events represented the film as happening to William Miller, played by Patrick Fugit, the boyish main character, happened to grow himself. Obviously not in the same dramatic fashion that it does in the movie, but it is sort of the sketch, the foundation for the film. It received widespread acclaim from critics and received 4 Academy Award noms, including a win for Best Original Screenplay, awarded the 2001 Grammy Award for Best Soundtrack. Roger Ebert hailed it as the best film of 2000, as well as the 9th best film of the 2000s. Also won 2 Golden Globes Awards, one for Best Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy, and Best Supporting Actress for Kate Hudson. In a 2016 poll conducted by BBC, Almost Famous was ranked the 79th greatest film since the year 2000. In a Hollywood Reporter list voted on by studio chiefs, Oscar winners, and TV royalty, Almost Famous was ranked as the 71st greatest film of all time. The film had a budget of $60 million, but only made $47 million at the box office, so a short-term failure, but in the long term, it quickly became a cult classic. Just to run through the plot here with you guys, in Act 1, the story opens with William at a young age, where we find him living at home with his mother, Frances McDormand, and his sister, Anita, played by Zooey Deschannel, in San Diego. While William gets along well with his mother and sister separately, both of the women in his life are at odds with each other. Elaine struggles to keep some form of control over Anita, who feels that her mother is way too much of a helicopter parent. One day, she brings home a copy of Simon and Garfunkel's Bookends album, and her mother confiscates it because she does not allow rock music in the house, saying that the songs are about drugs and promiscuous sex. Anita leaves in a fury. During this time, it's revealed to William that his mom skipped him 2 grades, as all his classmates around him are 13 and he's 11. So he's just way younger than everyone. He's smart cookie, so he skipped a few grades, but it has him leaving out of place. He doesn't have many friends. And his sister Anita decides to leave home to become an airline stewardess. She leaves her record collection to William. Before leaving, she says, "One day you'll be cool." She goes off to San Francisco. He finds a note in his sister's copy of The Who's album Tommy, which tells him to listen to it with a candle burning and he'll see his future. Fast forward a few years, and we have a more grown-up William, played by Patrick Fugit, who's now 15. He's in high school. In that time, he's become an avid rock music fan and interested in journalism. He's writing for several newspapers, including one edited by his idol and San Diego native Lester Bangs. They meet one day, and Phillip Seymour Hoffman gives him some advice. He tells him he's arrived at time for the death rattle of the genre, but he sees determination in William and offers to pay him for an interview with the band Black Sabbath, who will be playing that night. William goes to the show. He can't get in because he's so young, doesn't look legit, and with the help of a group of girls who call themselves the Band-Aids and their leader, Penny Lane, played by Kate Hudson, explain their philosophy of how they're not groupies and they're just there to support the music. They get him in the show. There he meets the opener for the night, the band Stillwater. He compliments them on their sound and just general talent, so they invite him to join them backstage. He ends up interviewing them, with much of it coming from Jeff Beebe, who's the lead singer, played by Jason Lee. He ends up watching the concert from the side stage with Penny Lane. After the show, he gets invited to meet them in LA, and Penny Lane comes along as well. A few days later, unknown to his mother, William sneaks off to LA with Penny, where they meet up with the band at the Hyatt House, nicknamed the Riot House. It's first here that we get the first little romantic interactions between Russell and Penny. A few days later, William gets a call from Rolling Stone. The writer Ben Fong Torres, editor played by Terry Chen of Rolling Stone, they ask him to cover the band as they go on tour. He hides the fact that he's only 16 years old. And he kind of has to hide it from his mom, who fears that this will interfere with his schoolwork and derail William's future. In Act 2, we see the fraying between the band, how Russell is obviously much more talented than the rest of them and is overshadowing them. Jeff Beebe especially is quite insecure about this, and they have a few arguments. Following that big blow-up, Russell and William end up at a house party in Kansas where he drops acid and climbs up on a rooftop, famously proclaiming to be a golden god. Then he jumps off the roof into the swimming pool. Really great scene. William calls Dick, who comes to the house and convinces Russell to return to the band. As they leave the house, Russell, who's still high on LSD, yells at William, believing him to be a cop. They get on the tour bus. It's just a low point for the band. But they all sort of reconcile when Elton John's Tiny Dancer comes on, and it's this famous scene where they all sing along to it. And William insists that he needs to go home, and Penny assures him that he is home. Then they get a new manager, played by Jimmy Fallon, who's, typical music label hotshot. He gets them a private plane, books them for a bunch of tour dates. It becomes much more about the money than the music. This sort of represents the commercialization of rock music that went on through the 70s and, it really culminates in the 80s. As the tour winds down, William has been able to interview everyone except for the most important person, who's Russell. He can't get Russell to talk to him, and he's getting pressured from his editors to get the story in and to get the interview with Russell. And his mother, who's growing worried, proclaims in class that rock stars have kidnapped my son. Russell calls his mother, assures him he's fine, but ends up getting a lecture from William's mother. Russell's pretty shaken by the conversation. At one of the stops, William overhears a poker game in which Dick and Russell wager Penny Lane and the Band-Aids in a game without Penny or the girls knowing. The girls leave the tour before Russell's wife meets the band. The band Humble Pie ends up winning the girls and pays Dick and Russell $50 and a case of Heineken beer. William is absolutely shocked. He tries to keep it away from Penny, but eventually feels like he has to tell her, and that has a equally devastating effect on Penny. They end up leaving the tour, and at a restaurant in New York, they find out that William's article is going to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. It's a big celebration for the band. However, Russell's girlfriend, his wife, Leslie, sees Penny in a nearby corner watching Russell. Dick tells her to go away. William takes off after and finds her at the Plaza Hotel, where she has downed an entire bottle of Quaaludes in the wake of her sadness at her rejection. Afterwards, Penny and William go for a walk through Central Park. She's saved. They pump her stomach. Afterwards, they go to walk Central Park, and they have this really intimate conversation, and William takes Penny to the airport, where she flies home to San Diego. William joins the band on the plane as they fly to a new venue. Everyone questions where William went in the middle of the night, but he doesn't tell them. before they can investigate any further, the plane is caught in a horrible bit of turbulence. Feeling like the plane may crash and they might die at any moment, they all start revealing their secrets. But instead of having a moment where they all come together and profess their love for each other, they all just start admitting to the terrible ways they've double-crossed one another. They've slept with each other's wives and girlfriends, how they're all jealous and resentful of Russell, and how Jimmy Fallon's character killed someone in a hit and run, and how their drummer reveals that he's gay. They end up making it through the turbulence. They don't die, but really the band is destroyed after this because the things that are said can't be taken back. When the plane lands, Russell tells William that he can write whatever he wants in regard to the band. He doesn't care anymore. He finally reports to the Rolling Stone headquarters in San Francisco, but without his key interview with Russell. The editors are, of course, shocked at how young William is. And William sort of breaks down as they tell him he has to get the interview and organize the piece. William calls Lester Bangs for a last piece of advice, and Lester tells him to be honest, truthful, and, sort of scolds him for befriending the band, making the mistake of letting them become his friends. Sometime after Stillwater, clearly on the edge of breaking up, Band-Aid, known as Sapphire, meets with Russell and yells at him for what happened with Penny, as well as ruining William's story, as the band denied 90% of the story, which really put Rolling Stone in an awkward position. Because they're like, well, is this true? Is this not? The band's denying most of it. You're saying it's true. It's quite shaking for William. And finally, Russell ends up at William's house because he wants to talk to Penny, but instead Penny gives him William's address. She does him a solid. And Russell meets Elaine, allows him to talk to her son after giving him another stern talking to. Russell explained that he retracts his statement to Rolling Stone, confirmed that the whole thing was true. He gets the opportunity to finally ask him what he loves about music, and Russell tells him he loves everything about music. The film then ends with a montage of different clips that play over Led Zeppelin's Tangerine. Stillwater goes back on tour with their old bus Doris as their main mode of transportation, with the tour called No More Planes Tour. Russell and BB have reconciled. William sits down to breakfast with Anita and his mother, who have also reconciled. And finally we see Penny at an airplane ticket counter, finally deciding to go to Morocco, which she said she would do at the beginning of the film. After the break, we will get into the story of the making of the film itself.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back to the show. We just went through the basics of the film, went through the plot synopsis. Now we're going to explore the pre-production, the casting, how it got made, what inspired it, all that good stuff. So, Almost Famous was produced by Columbia Studios in collaboration with Steven Spielberg's new Paramount Pictures. Cameron Crowe was already a beloved voice in the movies for his high school movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Say Anything. When his 1996 film Jerry Maguire grossed more than $270 million and was nominated for 5 Oscars, Crowe finally had the freedom to make his passion project a chronicle of his early 70s adventures as a teenage writer for Rolling Stone, when he interviewed artists like David Bowie, Led Zeppelin, Joni Mitchell, and others. He said, "Jerry Maguire gave me a credit line, and I thought, I'm going to use it because I'll never be able to make this movie unless it's right now. This is one that's achingly personal, and I'll try not to spend a lot of money." Like his young protagonist, Crowe had gotten his start as a rock journalist at the age of 15. In 1973, when he was just 16, he joined the staff of Rolling Stone, where he eventually became an associate editor. While still in his teens, the young writer and avid fan profiled many of the era's influential artists, had a profound effect on Crowe, and over the years, as he turned from journalism to filmmaking, he attempted to bring the essence of that story to the big screen. As Crowe said, "It wasn't until it became personal that it became a movie worth making. When I took that jump, it was very scary, but then stuff started to pour out of me, and the story became larger than just about rock in 1973. It became about music and how it affected me and my family and how it still affects me today." Casting director Gail Levin launched a nationwide search for a teenage actor to play Crowe. The answer was Patrick Fugit, a teenager from Salt Lake City. He ended up giving Fugit a bunch of rock and roll homework. As Fugit said, he gave me all these albums from Led Zeppelin, The Who, Neil Young, David Bowie, Peter Frampton. Actors originally selected for the film included Meryl Streep as Elaine Miller, William's mother, Natalie Portman and Sarah Polley as Penny Lane, and Brad Pitt for the role of lead guitarist Russell Hammond. Kate Hudson was initially cast as William's sister, but was recast as Penny Lane following the dropouts of Portman and Polley. 4 months later, Brad Pitt backed out, and the role went to Billy Crudup instead. In reaction to Brad Pitt dropping out, Cameron Crowe said he wept, but I think in the back of my brain, I knew that he had never fully fallen in love with the character. Casting director Gail Levin suspected that Brad Pitt backed out for financial reasons, while Crowe added that he may have been uncomfortable with the age difference between Russell and teenage Penny Lane. The rest of the band was hired afterwards. Frances McDormand was cast in the role of William's mother after her performances in Fargo. Phillip Seymour Hoffman was cast as Lester Bangs, and Jimmy Fallon as the role of Dennis Hope at the end. The cast of the band Stillwater, based on the Allman Brothers, Led Zeppelin, Eagles, Leonard Skinner, went to rock school to teach them all how to play instruments and how to carry themselves like true rock stars. The headmaster of this was Peter Frampton, the former rock star from the 70s himself, and Cameron Crowe's wife, Nancy Wilson, who was part of the band Heart. Making 1973 feel like the present went to the costume and set design as well. They brought back the decor and fashion of the early 70s, but not in the retro styles of today, but as they truly were back then. Costume designer focused on bold combinations of fabrics, patterns, shapes that were prevalent in the fashions of 70s rock and roll. Lace, velvet, fringe, bell-bottoms, florals, cowboy hats, pattern on pattern, texture on texture, all appear in varying degrees in the wardrobe designs. The true inspiration of the music, Crowe said, the true inspiration of the movie is the music. It's about that feeling you have when you've just discovered a song and you listen to it 10 times in a row. You might eventually get sick of the song, but for that moment, you're ageless, you're timeless, you're in your own private universe. That's a feeling I think only music can give you. I wanted to do a movie that tapped you on the shoulder and said, I felt that way too. So collaborating with composer Nancy Wilson and music supervisor Danny Bramson, Crowe incorporated both score and songs to evoke the period as well as the emotions. The soundtrack featured cuts from The Who, Led Zeppelin, Simon and Garfunkel, and the Allman Brothers. Crowe, Wilson, and Frampton also wrote original songs for the band. When rehearsals began and the lights went down on the scene where they actually perform for the concert, Noah Taylor, who played Dick, announces the band and the extras start screaming. It felt like an actual show. Adrenaline's pumping. That is what Peter or any musician must have felt on that stage. That's what Billy Crudup said, who plays Russell. As he also went on to say, the first time we actually played in front of people and I saw the looks on their faces, it was startling. I suddenly understood the behavior of many musicians because they have so much license from the fans who have given them that kind of power. Kate Hudson, who was surprised to find herself as caught up in the show as Penny Lane would have been, said, "When the guys hit the stage, I couldn't believe it. I mean, this was a full-on rock and roll concert. It was incredible. The set as a whole felt like a family to all the cast members. Everyone took care of the young Patrick Fugit like he was a little brother." For the party scene where Billy famously yells he's a golden god, that was filmed over a period of 2 or 3 days. They had a stuntman jump into the pool and Billy jumping onto the mat. It's a little, industry secret. He didn't actually jump in that pool. Billy actually invented his own interpretation of what an acid trip would be like. He'd never actually partaken in an LSD experience, so he sort of had to draw on the counsel of people who had, and also Cameron Crowe's direction. So Cameron Crowe basically told him to act as if his hands were tingling and shooting out little bolts of electricity, and try to channel that into the physical performance, which he definitely gets down in this. And it's just an amazing, great scene. 3 days, those party scenes take a long time to film. As someone who was once an extra on a film where there was a party scene, it really is quite the ordeal because they have to get so much coverage. You have so many extras, but you have to cover this huge gathering, but still pick up the conversations and the lines that are going on. So it's more complex than you would think, honestly. It takes a lot of time. In the scene after the house party, while they're on a bus, they're all in a low point of the band. They just had this huge argument. They had to go rescue Russell from this random party in the middle of nowhere, and no one's saying anything. Everything feels a bit off, but Tiny Dancer comes on the radio and they all start singing along, and it's this beautiful moment where they sort of reconcile. William looks at Penny Lane and tells her he has to return home to San Diego, and she replies famously, "You are home." According to Crowe, that line was actually improvised. Towards the end of the film, in the scene where they're walking in Central Park after Penny's had her stomach pumped and had her heart broken by Russell, they have that important scene where it's sort of the last time they'll be together. And Hudson had actually gone out the night before until 4 a.m. with Jimmy Fallon and Jason Lee because it was their last night, or the day before was their last day shooting, so they wanted to celebrate, and they demanded that Kate Hudson come down with them, and she couldn't refuse. She went out, stayed out till 4 a.m. She said that Cameron saw me, and he looks at me, and I look at him. We make eye contact, and he goes, "Rock and roll." So he knew exactly what she had done, but he accepted it and was like, you know what, this is actually keeping within the spirit of this film. You showing up here on an all-nighter. And Patrick himself was pretty exhausted shooting that scene as well, because they shot the film in order, which is pretty rare. Usually films and TV is shot out of sequence, which means it's not like you shoot from the start of the script to the end of the script. You shoot just... Sometimes you'll start with the last scene, or you hop around from the middle to the end to the beginning, or vice versa. It doesn't... There's no, like, actual timeline that they're following like it is in the script. They're just filming scenes at different times. But they shot this in order, and it was a very long shoot. Everyone was pretty exhausted, and that was tough because all of Patrick Fugit's scenes, I mean, he's in most of the movie. He doesn't really ever get a break. And he has all these emotional scenes towards the end of the film. And Patrick was really struggling to maintain his performance level and to keep going, keep pushing through. And basically Cameron Crowe had to talk him through it and really push him to finally get the last little bit of energy he had. And ultimately it worked. He got it out of him, but it was just a real struggle. And, you know, Patrick Fugit had never done anything like that. He's just a kid. He's still in high school. He'd done, you know, a few plays, maybe a movie here or there, but he would never done anything this long-term, this just expansive. So it was really difficult for him, and really difficult for everyone on set. However, they finally got through it, and part of the reason they shot so long and Crowe did so many takes and pushed everyone to the limit is because he knew that he wasn't going to get any reshoots. He knew that he had to get it all that day during that period, because this was his one chance to get it, and he had to push. Because, yeah, he had his credit, as he said, to make this film after Jerry Maguire. It was still seen as kind of sunken cost by the studios, and they didn't want to put any more money in it than they had to, so they were not going to give him the freedom to do reshoots. They're like, no, this is your one chance. So he really had to make it work. Pushed everyone. It worked. He got some good performances at the end. Obviously, if he didn't, we would not be talking about this film. And they actually screened the film for Led Zeppelin once it was done. After the lights came up, Robert Plant immediately said to Cameron Crowe, "So Cameron, is your mom really like that?" There was a pause, and they all burst out laughing. "She was exactly like that," he said. And Frances McDormand had played her perfectly. And this was one hell of a shoot. Like I said, a lot of days, a lot of energy levels being pushed to the absolute limit, and Cameron Crowe really trying to get every ounce, every take he could. But ultimately, everyone did develop that camaraderie that you want on a set. All the actors talk about how it's probably the most fun they've ever had shooting a film, how Cameron Crowe was a dream to work with because he was so collaborative and gave them a ton of freedom to take the characters where they wanted. And it was just really that family community atmosphere that every actor craves, and it was just a perfect creative environment, and that resulted in a fantastic film. After the break, we're going to get into a little bit of analysis of the film, and before we leave, we're going to talk about our favorite scenes, our favorite quotes, a little bit of trivia as well. Stick around for all that.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the show. Having a lovely trip down memory lane. Talking about Almost Famous on its 20th anniversary. The movie is just such a classic, and every music fan can connect with it. Even if they're not fans of classic rock music from the 70s, it does speak to fandom and what it's like to love something in a way that you can only love something when you're a kid or a teenager. It's so innocent and pure and idealistic and naive. The movie itself is not just about William Miller. It's about the time and the band and the early 70s when idealism collided with commerce. As Roger Ebert wrote, it's not a rock film, it's a coming-of-age film about an idealistic kid who sees the real world witnessing its cruelties and heartbreaks, and yet finds much room for hope. In his review for the New York Times, A.O. Scott wrote, "The movie's real pleasures are to be found not in its story, but in its profusion of funny, offbeat scenes. It's a kind of picture that invites you to go back and savor your favorite moments like choice album cuts." And if the whole movie feels a little naive, a little romanticized, that's because our protagonist, William, just like teenage Cameron Crowe, was totally innocent. He's basically a kid in a candy shop. Of course, it's surrounded with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but through his naive eyes, it gives us an excuse to be the starry-eyed music lovers that William and Penny Lane are. And Cameron Crowe was at that time and sort of continues to be so. It is exactly the point. You need to see the film through the eyes of that innocent, pure love that you have for music at that age. We watch him grow up from a precocious 11-year-old into a blossoming rock journalist at 15. The movie even breaks the third-person point of view at times, as several of the characters speak directly into the camera, speaking directly to William, that is. That reinforces the fact that it is his story. He's forced to grow up and learn about everything from responsibility and trust to professionalism, love, and heartbreak. Of course, William's not the only character who grows throughout the film. It seems like everyone sort of changes for the better. Everyone sort of grows from their experience, which is, a happy ending and one that feels earned within the context of the story. Cameron Crowe chose to emulate the title sequence of To Kill a Mockingbird, perhaps the greatest coming-of-age story in American storytelling. and that is to set the coming-of-age tone from the very start of the film. He's also described Almost Famous as his love letter to rock and roll. Crowe, like William, lived and breathed rock and roll, and the heart and soul of the movie is the music itself. In part, it's a commentary as well on the infiltration of commerce, big business interests into the music world, and that meeting an art form that was built on rebellion, uninhibited expression, and anti-establishment sentiment. And when we see the band struggle most, it's because the band has lost touch with their passion and love for music. They get caught up in trying to be cool or trying to make money. William helps them rediscover their love for the music. It also focuses on what it means to be cool, what it means to be uncool, and what that means for one's identity and the importance and creation and forming of a personal identity. Like I said, the rock stars are obsessed with the appearance of cool, pressuring William to portray the band and everything they do in the most flattering manner possible. Lester Bangs, on the other hand, gives the message of the film: being cool is overrated. In the frantic clamoring to be cool, many of the characters lose touch with their true identities. As they approach fame, Stillwater get caught up in the superficiality of it, lose touch with the music itself. Another great part of this movie is the way the characters talk about music with almost this spiritual or religious-like quality. William's older sister, Anita, played by Zooey Deschannel, leaves him that secret cache of vinyl records that she says will set him free, along with a note that says, "Listen to Tommy with a candle burning and you'll see your future." The lead singer of Stillwater, played by Jason Lee, Jeff Beebe, cites the buzz as the best part of rock star life and says that music will save the world. Lester Bangs, who's of course the most cynical character, reminds William that some of the things he's taking in with wide-eyed reverence are objectively not good. Yet his opening lines really echo the fans' awe that other characters share. Music, true music, not just rock and roll. It chooses you. It lives in your car or alone listening to your headphones. The supposedly consequence-free life of rock and rollers, the rebellion of that era against conventional moral codes, and the thrill of fame are ultimately traps and false lures, as we see in the film. It also reminds us that being a fan and having a true passion for music is as important as fame and celebrity, if not more so. Patrick Fugit's eyes really tell much of the story here as well. He's really observant, but also active and eager when he cannot hide his longing to be part of the cool crowd, be part of the band, and to be part of Penny Lane's life. And overall, no one is really vilified in the film. It's pretty generous to all the characters, even the flawed ones like Russell, and who basically recognizes his faults and all the hurt he's caused. Because Cameron Crowe ultimately has affection for all the characters here, and while part of that definitely is nostalgia, it squares with William and Cameron Crowe's instinct to see the best in everybody. It also is a great introduction into music journalism. This film really... There's not a lot of movies about music journalism, and this gives you a sort of glimpse into what that industry is like, and it's obviously not anywhere near the same. There was a lot more money in journalism in general in the early 70s, especially with publications like Rolling Stone. And yeah, like the whole idea that you could even tour with a band that long and get that sort of access to established musicians is so foreign to any music journalist now. You'd be lucky to get 15 minutes alone with a musician, let alone just following them across the country and getting everything paid for by your publication and the band taking you in like one of their own and being willing to hang out with you and talk. Like, that just doesn't happen in journalism anymore. It's very much access based and really just, as Lester Bangs says, you have to be unmerciful and, don't allow them to be your friends. But that is sort of what music journalism has become, because the only way you get access these days is by being friendly to the band or the musician. They only want puff pieces. They'll only talk to you if you're going to write about how great they are. They're not going to have you interview them if you're going to be critical or just honest. That's not what they want. They want to control the narrative and control the way the artist is presented, which means the journalism itself suffers because it's not honest, it's not truthful, it's biased, and it's told through the way that the artist or the musician or the band wants to see themselves. And that's not journalism at that point. That's just an extended commercial. And that's not just a problem for music journalism, that's just a problem for journalism in general these days. It really captures that conflict too between meeting your heroes, where, the old saying, don't ever meet your heroes. William definitely experiences that because, he has such admiration for rock and rock stars themselves, but then sort of sees just how human and flawed they are, like everybody else, through the fights they have and the petty little arguments and just the vapidness of the lifestyle and what they're pursuing, that fame and money. Kind of forgets what it means to be a fan and why music is so important in the first place. And William definitely has to struggle with that himself, and that's every music fan struggles with that as well, where, maybe you're lucky enough to meet a musician or an artist that you admire and they sort of blow you off, or you just have a negative experience, so that can devastate you. Never mind the way most people have that moment. You find out a musician or a hero has a dark past or maybe wasn't the best sort of person. It's really difficult to see because we put them on such a pedestal, but find that they're as flawed and sometimes worse off than we are, or that the people around us are, that they've sort of forgotten what it is to be a normal person or to be a decent, good human being. And that's quite devastating, but it's an important part of maturing and becoming an adult, because it's about losing that blind faith and that blind admiration to where you have to be like, you have to earn that respect. It's much better to have musicians or just people in your life earn your respect instead of just giving it to them willy-nilly when you idolize a band like that. Roger Ebert wrote, looking at William, earnestly grasping his tape recorders, trying to get in his interview, desperately going to Bangs for advice, terrified as Ben Fong Torres rails about deadlines, crushed when it looks as if the story will be rejected, we know we're looking at a kid who has the right stuff and will go far. Someday he might even direct a movie like Almost Famous.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
So why is Almost Famous a classic? Why are we talking about this 20 years later? Still harping on this movie that didn't make a ton of money. Is not like one of the Pantheon films. It's kind of this niche about music journalism and rock music at this particular time. Why are we talking about this in the year 2020? Well, it really is one of the greatest coming-of-age movies, I think, of all time. It really captures that transitionary period between innocence and adulthood, between knowledge or the perceived feeling of knowledge and then realizing you don't have it figured out and adults themselves don't have it figured out. It's also just a great mix of comedy and drama, which is something that, Cameron Crowe does extremely well. Obviously, with films like Jerry Maguire, they had a great balance. That's a rom-com, so quintessential mix of comedy and drama. This isn't a rom-com, but it still operates in that sort of space where you have a lot of funny moments, a lot of levity, but at the same time, drama, real emotions, characters take real turns. It's a roller coaster, and it just feels real, true to life. Life is both funny and sad, and that's what this captures really, really well. And the era of the film feels really alive because Cameron Crowe was able to recreate it how it felt to him at the time. When you base a movie on your life, that gives you a huge advantage when it comes to developing its sensibility, the way it looks, the way it feels, because it's not an imagined state. It's not this fantasy world. It's not even a Hollywood trope. It's Cameron Crowe's life. And so he's able to recall that in great detail and inject the film, bring his memories to life, really. It's really, really amazing. And something that's incredibly rare when it comes to film. And the performances are just fantastic. Phillip Seymour Hoffman is just my MVP for this movie. He's probably appears in like 5 scenes, maybe 4. Incredible. Just kills it every time. He's throwing his fastball the whole time. And yeah, he nearly steals the show. He's a perfect part of Lester Bangs. Like, the way you read Lester Bangs is the way Phillip Seymour Hoffman is performing him, with just that contempt, that cynicism, but also that buried poetic ideal of what art should be, of what music should be, and really what it means to be a fan and a critic. And like I said, he first comes off as somewhat cynical he's been in the business too long, but really we learn that he was right about everything and is probably the coolest guy in the movie because he knows he's not cool. So paradoxically, that sort of makes him the ultimate cool character because everyone else is sort of posturing and pretending and performing, but Lester Bangs is authentic. And what's cooler than being authentic? Being honest. That is like cooler than anything that Jason Lee's character is wearing in this movie. Kate Hudson is perfect in the role of Penny Lane as well. She just injects it with that bright, just light of positivity and bubbliness, but also wisdom and reverence for music and really just an innocent sort of love. She's really too pure for Russell and for rock music at that time, or at any time really. She is fandom in its purest form and just goodness. I guess you could say that's a criticism of the film. She's a bit manic pixie dream girly, but really she represents the best of what a fan is and what being committed to music and a life of music is. So she's just perfect in the role. Think of the scene where Patrick Fugit explains or tells her the story of how they just gambled her and the Band-Aids away for a case of beer, and she says, "What kind of beer?" And you can just see the pain and anguish, not only with the way she says it, but the way she's acting. That's probably her best performance, really. She absolutely kills this role. I don't know if there was any role that was better suited for her at that time, especially because she was really young herself at that moment and trying to establish herself. So there was sort of a simpatico between Kate Hudson and the character. Frances McDormand is incredible as well. She's always such a great actress in every role she's in. And she injects this character who she has to do a lot. She has to be stern, unlikable at times, unyielding, stubborn, ideological, but also you have to understand everything from her perspective. So you see how she's caring, how she just wants to protect her son, protect her daughter, and really just struggling to do the best she can, especially because her husband's dead. She has to do this all on her own as a single mom. She's a teacher. She's dealing with young people all the time, and they're up and down mood swings. So she has a tough job, not only as a character, but for the actor themselves. For McDormand, it's really difficult. Not a lot of actors can pull that off, but she gives you that complexity, gives you all the colors, all the palettes that's required of William's mother, and ultimately you love her and understand why William wants to go back home. She ultimately is a loving, caring mother, and though her methods get the best of her and she's a bit too small-minded about art and music, it really is out of a place of love, and really you can only judge people's intentions at the end of the day. McDormand pulls that off completely, and it really is a miracle of a performance. It's fantastic. I thought Patrick Fugit did a great job as well. I mean, the guy had zero experience really on a major set, a major production. This is his first time doing it, and he's basically in every scene. He doesn't get to take a break. He doesn't get to come out in spots and do his best and then go home. No, he has to be consistent and really take us on a journey, because we are seeing the movie through his eyes. So if he doesn't pull it off, then the whole movie falls like a house of cards. And he injects that innocence, but also moral righteousness and purity that really is at the core of music fandom, and really just speaking for the audience, what we're all thinking. And it's a well-written character, but Patrick Fugit injects the life into it, and that's a lot of pressure to have to really be the director as he was in his past. I mean, imagine the pressure and the criticism you're going to get when you're literally playing the person who's directing you. That is next level pressure, but he manages to pull it off. And really, the best thing is it captures the love of music. It captures what it is to be obsessed, to live your life by music, through the narratives of music, through the ideals, through the principles, through the values, through the spirit of music, and sort of that innocence, but also immortal sort of affection that you can have for the art form, because it really does speak deep in your soul, deep in your psyche, deep in who you are. Like Lester Bangs says, the music chooses you. We don't choose the music. It really is this inexplicable form of love that language really can't capture, and the movie, the feeling, the sentiment of it does, and that is an absolute triumph. Favorite scenes and quotes. The scene where the private plane, they're flying to their next gig and they run into the terrible turbulence, and they all start just confessing their biggest insecurities and sins. It's just hilarious in a dark way, where you have Jimmy Fallon admitting he killed a man in a hit and run. They all admit they slept with the manager's wife. Jeff admits he slept with Russell's wife and says that they all hate him, talking about how much they resent him. And William admits he loves Penny. He kind of chews out the band for being so petty and immature. And then the drummer admits he's gay. And so you got all this thrown out there, and then it turns out, oh, we made it. So what should be this scene of triumph and victory is sort of subverted into this low point, because they all said horrible things that can never be taken back nor forgotten. And it's just brilliant and hilarious. The house party scene, obviously, is just iconic in movie history. Just the whole idea of a rock star showing up to your house party is great, too. That juxtaposition of this supposed star hanging out with a bunch of high school kids at this lame party is just so great for someone who's just, confused and directionless like Russell is at that moment, and just angry and just wants to blow off steam. And where he yells he's a golden god was just one of the funniest moments in movie history, and one that everyone repeats after watching that movie. You hear that everywhere. The Lester Bangs scenes are just... Every Lester Bangs scenes, Phillip Seymour Hoffman is totally electric. You can't take your eyes off him. He's magnetic. His dance moves to Iggy Pop's Search and Destroy is basically how everyone dances to that song. And the cafe scene with William at the beginning and the phone call at the end are nice little bookends for the film, where he sort of acts like the narrator or the man behind the curtain, Oz, where he tells you what it is, what's real, what's not. He really is the angel on the shoulder of William. And you kind of bristle at him at first, but he does prove to be right in everything that he said. He really did predict everything that was going to happen in the movie. When William finally interviews Russell, that's a great scene as well. They're no longer at odds. And in this love triangle, you just get that great question, what do you love about music? That's exactly what you want. Get down to the core of what's important. And the first concert with Stillwater on stage is a great scene. Really captures the magic of seeing a band for the first time, or seeing a band that catches you, speaks to you. It's very hard to replicate. And Williams, his mother's phone call with Russell, where she basically lectures him, is just total mother moment. Fantastic. And obviously, Tiny Dancer scene. It's the most iconic scene in the whole movie, and one that will live forever in movie history. I feel like I don't even have to break that one down. It's just pitch perfect. And as far as quotes, you got to start out with a collection of Lester Bangs quotes. You'll meet them all again on a long journey to the middle. These people are not your friends. These are people who want you to write sanctimonious stories about the genius of rock stars, and they will ruin rock and roll and strangle everything we love about it. The only true currency in this bankrupt world is what you share with someone else when you're uncool. Give me the Guess Who. They got the courage to be drunken buffoons, which makes them poetic. And the day it ceases to be dumb is the day it ceases to be real, right? And then it just becomes an industry of cool. Then his mom's quotes, don't take drugs. Rock stars have kidnapped my son. Just iconic one-liners right there. Anita telling William, one day you'll be cool. The funny exchange between William and Penny Lane about their ages, where he says, actually I'm 16. She says, me too, isn't it funny? The truth just sounds different. And then William deadpan, I'm 15. Just hilarious. Another great Penny Lane quote, I always tell the girls, never take it seriously. If you never take it seriously, you never get hurt. You never get hurt, you always have fun. And if you ever get lonely, just go to the record store and visit your friends. There's another funny quote where their manager says, if you think Mick Jagger will still be out there trying to be a rock star at age 50, then you are sadly mistaken. The joke there being that Mick Jagger has never stopped touring. I think he's 80 now, and he's still doing concerts. Just hilarious in retrospect. And the best quote of the whole film that it basically encapsulates what it means to be a fan. They don't even know what it is to be a fan, you know? To truly love some silly little piece of music or some band so much that it hurts. And just a little bit of trivia before I let you guys go. Cameron Crowe's mother appeared on set for a cameo. Crowe was desperate to keep her away from McDormand, who was playing, obviously, the character based on her. And he didn't want them to meet because he feared that McDormand was going to, get too confused and try to act too much like his mother. But when he left the set for a few minutes on the first day of the shooting, he found his mother and McDormand having lunch together. And Phillip Seymour Hoffman's schedule only permitted him to be on set for 4 days, and he had a flu the whole time. He was sick with the flu and delivered that amazing performance. That is it for the show. Please go watch Almost Famous, classic film. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Music Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please subscribe to the show, leave a review, that really helps us out. Follow us on all the social media platforms. Have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.